She said she was keeping the house, the car, and the dog. I said, take them. What her lawyer didn't know was that I'd already moved everything 6 months ago, that I never thought I'd be that guy on Reddit. The one typing out his life implosion at 2 a.m. under a throwaway account. Half for catharsis, half because I need someone out there to tell me I'm not insane. But here we are. I'm 38. I'm a systems engineer. Basically, I install and design security networks for mid-sized companies. Cameras, sensors, cloud storage setups. Boring but stable work. My wife, Claire, is 35, a freelance interior designer. We met 8 years ago at a mutual friend's housewarming. She was the kind of person who made silence feel like a performance. Calm, confident, like she'd rehearsed her life before stepping on stage. We got married 3 years later. Bought a small 2-story house in the suburbs of Seattle. I remember how proud I felt signing that mortgage. It was the first time I thought, okay, maybe I've got this adult thing figured out. Claire handled the aesthetics, furniture, curtains, plants, the whole magazine spread look. I handled the technical side, the router, smart thermostats, home cameras, mostly for convenience, not paranoia. We weren't rich, but we were doing fine. At least, that's what I thought. Looking back, there were small, almost imperceptible things. Claire started taking more client trips around 2 years ago. She'd go to Portland, sometimes Vancouver, supposedly to meet high-end clients. I never questioned it much. She was independent, and I trusted her. She'd send me photos from design studios, hotel lobbies, coffee cups next to color palettes. It looked legit. Around the same time, she began avoiding joint finances. We'd once sat side by side paying bills. Suddenly, it became, I'll handle my stuff. You handle yours. She said it was just simpler for tax purposes since she was self-employed. Then there was her phone. Always face down, always on silent. Once, when she left it on the counter, I noticed her lock screen wallpaper had changed. It used to be a photo of us hiking Mount Rainier. Now it was a quote. Protect your peace, even from people you love. I laughed about it at first. Now, I think about that quote a lot. The day everything cracked was so ordinary it almost makes me angry. It was a Thursday. I was making coffee before logging into a Zoom call. Claire walked in wearing that calm, rehearsed look she always had. Only this time, something about it felt brittle. She sat down at the kitchen island and said, "We need to talk." You know that line from movies, but it's different in real life. In real life, it doesn't sound like a warning. It sounds like someone closing a door behind you. She told me she'd been unhappy for a while, that she needed space, that she'd found clarity and didn't want to keep living a life that felt stuck. I asked if there was someone else. She looked offended, genuinely offended, and said, "That's not the point." Then she said the line that still echoes in my head like a gunshot. "I'm keeping the house, the car, and the dog in the divorce." Just like that. No hesitation. No discussion. Just a declaration, as if it had already been decided in some secret meeting I wasn't invited to. I didn't yell. Didn't cry. Didn't throw anything. I just stood there, staring at her. She looked prepared. Her tone, her posture, everything about her screamed that this conversation was rehearsed. I remember my voice sounding strangely detached when I asked, "What makes you think that's how this works?" She smirked. That small, superior curve of the lips that had once made her look confident, but now just made her look cruel. "Because it's all in my name. The car's registered to me. The mortgage, I've been paying it. The dog's registered under my profile. My lawyer says it's pretty straightforward." Her lawyer. That word hit harder than anything else. She'd already lawyered up. I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. "Take them." Her expression faltered for a moment. She wasn't expecting that. Maybe she thought I'd beg, argue, try to win her back. Instead, I rinsed my coffee mug, put it in the sink, and went upstairs. Inside, I felt like I'd just been hit by a truck. Not from pain, but from clarity. Because what she didn't know, what her lawyer clearly hadn't checked, was that 6 months ago, I'd transferred ownership of almost everything. The house deed, the car title, even the savings account holding the down payment. All legally listed under my mother's name. It wasn't out of spite. It was strategy. See, I grew up watching my father lose everything in a divorce because he trusted that shared meant fair. When Claire started getting secretive, when she pushed me to sign certain tax simplifications, I quietly started preparing for the worst. I didn't know for sure what was coming. I just had a gut feeling that trust was slowly being repurposed into leverage. So I took steps. Legal, documented, notarized steps. For the next week, we barely spoke. Claire moved into the guest room. I worked late hours, mostly to stay out of the house. She started having consultations over the phone. I could hear her voice through the walls, rehearsed, calm, self-righteous. At night, I'd go over the digital paperwork, the deed transfers, the notarized timestamps, the proof of my payments, the recorded conversations. Washington is a two-party consent state, so I never recorded her directly, but I had emails, messages, bank records. It wasn't anger anymore. It was precision, like switching from emotional pain to operational focus. Because I knew this wasn't just about losing a house or a dog. It was about being rewritten as the villain in someone else's story. And I wasn't going to let that happen. Exactly 10 days after that kitchen conversation, I got a thick envelope via courier. Inside was a formal notice, petition for dissolution of marriage, signed by her attorney. The last page had her signature, neat and confident. And right under it, a list of requested property claims. Primary residence, address listed. 2019 Subaru Outback. Pet custody, Cooper, Australian Shepherd. Spousal support, pending valuation. I stared at it for a long time. Then, for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Because I realized something. She was fighting a war that had already been lost before it began. The first thing I did after reading that letter was call my friend Marcus. He's a corporate attorney, not a divorce lawyer, but he knows enough about contracts and property to keep someone like me from stepping on landmines. He came over that evening with his laptop and his six-pack. We sat in my living room, the one Claire had decorated with earthy tones and framed typography prints. Home is where love lives. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Marcus read through the petition, scrolling slowly, occasionally sighing. Well, he said finally, she's got guts. But her lawyer didn't do his homework. I told him about the transfers, how I'd moved the deed, the title, and the savings account into my mother's name months before. He frowned, not out of judgment, but calculation. You filed the quitclaim with the county clerk? Yeah, recorded and stamped. And the car? Gift transfer notarized. Insurance and registration switched over. And your mom's alive, coherent, not under any guardianship. Perfectly healthy. He nodded. Then you're fine. You didn't hide assets. You legally reassigned ownership before the divorce proceedings. There's nothing fraudulent here. He paused, took a sip of beer, and added, You do realize she's going to explode when she finds out. I did, and some part of me wasn't looking forward to it. For a week, nothing happened. Claire still lived in the guest room, still walked Cooper like it was her dog. We moved like strangers, occupying the same simulation of a marriage. She seemed strangely serene, which told me her lawyer had filled her head with confidence. One night, she came into the living room while I was watching a documentary. She didn't look angry. She looked smug. I signed the papers, she said. You'll get served officially next week, but I wanted to let you know. I just nodded. Thanks for the heads up. She lingered, maybe waiting for a reaction. When none came, she said, It doesn't have to be ugly, Alex. If you just cooperate, this can be quick and painless. The words hung in the air. Cooperate, painless. They weren't negotiations. They were ultimatums wrapped in therapy speak. I said, yeah, I prefer painless. And that was that. The court date came 3 weeks later. Snohomish County Courthouse. Gray skies, cold rain. The kind of day where everything feels like it's already halfway ruined before it begins. Her lawyer was young, slick hair, shiny shoes, full of confidence he hadn't earned yet. He smiled at me like I was a patient refusing anesthesia before surgery. When the judge called our case, Claire straightened her shoulders, every inch of her posture rehearsed. She looked calm, professional, ready to move on. I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness. Just an odd kind of detachment. Her attorney started with a predictable opening. My client has maintained the residence, paid for the car, provided care for the family pet, and requests equitable division consistent with her financial contributions. I remember him gesturing toward her like a salesman showing off a product. Then it was our turn. Marcus stood, calm as a stone, and handed the judge a folder. Inside were the documents. Quitclaim deed recorded 6 months before the separation. Car title transfer. Bank account ownership change. Insurance records. Digital timestamps, notarized and authenticated. He didn't raise his voice or use dramatic language. Just facts. Your Honor, the property in question no longer legally belongs to either party. Ownership was transferred before proceedings began. All filings are public record. The young lawyer blinked like someone had just switched off the light in his head. Claire turned to me, slow, confused, and whispered something I couldn't hear. Then the confusion turned to disbelief, then anger. The judge flipped through the pages, lips moving silently as she read the dates. When she reached the deed recording, she looked up. "Counselor," she said to Claire's lawyer, "were you aware of these prior transfers?" He hesitated. "No, Your Honor. My client informed me the property was jointly held." The judge leaned back. "It hasn't been, for half a year." The silence that followed was almost physical, thick, humming. You could feel everyone realizing at the same time that the story they'd come prepared for had just collapsed. Claire's face went pale, then red. She tried to speak, but the judge raised a hand. "Mrs. W., please refrain from addressing the court directly." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat there, watching her struggle to process the new physics of her situation, the realization that her plan had no floor. When the hearing ended, the judge granted her the right to keep personal effects, denied spousal support due to lack of financial dependency, and dismissed the property claims pending separate ownership validation. Outside, in the parking lot, she caught up with me. "You planned this," she hissed. I said quietly, "I planned for the possibility that you might do exactly what you did." Her expression softened for half a second, like she wanted to find some moral high ground. "I just wanted to be happy, Alex." "Yeah," I said. "So did I." Then I walked away. In the following weeks, she moved out. Took some furniture, some clothes, a few plants. Cooper stayed with me. She didn't even try to argue that one after the ruling. I think she was too humiliated. Mutual friends took sides, as they always do. Her version was that I'd tricked her, that I'd hidden things, that I'd been cold and calculating. Mine was quieter. I didn't post anything, didn't explain myself, just let time do the talking. But time doesn't always clear your name. Sometimes it just makes the noise fade until nobody remembers what really happened. The house felt different after she left. Not emptier, cleaner, somehow, like a window finally opened. But it wasn't triumph I felt. More like post-surgery numbness. You survive, but something's been cut out, and you're not sure what. I still went to work. Still walked Cooper. Still answered texts like life hadn't just been dissected in public. But every so often, I'd see her name pop up somewhere, an old shared Spotify playlist, a label on a piece of mail, and I'd feel that quiet, precise ache again. Not because I missed her, but because I realized how much of myself I'd handed over without question, how easily love can become paperwork. Marcus called one night, checking in. "You holding up?" "Yeah," I said. "It's over." He paused. "You did everything right, man. Don't second guess it." "I know," I said, but I still did. The funny thing about winning is that it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like standing alone in the ruins of something you spent years building and realizing you saved the walls, but lost the home. And maybe that's what people don't tell you about self-protection. Every layer of defense you build also keeps warmth out. I'd done everything legally, strategically, rationally. I'd won. But I couldn't shake the thought that maybe, somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being a husband and started being a strategist. And by the time she said, "I'm keeping everything," maybe she wasn't even wrong, because in some twisted way, she already had. Update 1. It's been a little over 2 months since the hearing. For a while, I thought that was the end of it. Clean break, legal closure, everyone moves on. But people don't move on that cleanly. Not when ego is involved. Claire reached out 3 weeks after she moved out. A short, almost civil text. "Can we meet to talk about the house? There are some things we didn't cover." I didn't answer right away. Marcus had warned me. Once lawyers get embarrassed in court, they start digging. Be ready for round 2. We met at a cafe halfway between her new apartment and my office. She looked different, thinner, tired, but still polished in that way people are when they're trying to perform normalcy. She started with small talk. I let her. Then she got to the point. Apparently, her lawyer had discovered new information. She said it like she was unveiling a plot twist. They were considering filing a motion to contest the asset transfers, claiming they were made in anticipation of divorce and therefore fraudulent. I didn't say much, just listened. When she paused, waiting for me to defend myself, I asked quietly. Did he tell you that would actually work, or did he just say it to make you feel better about losing? She didn't answer. She just stared at me, the way someone stares when they realize their old tactics don't land anymore. I told her, calmly, that all transfers were made before any separation was discussed, before any petitions were filed, and that everything had been declared in my financial disclosures. I reminded her that she'd signed several of those documents herself back when things were still fine. Her eyes flickered, recognition, then irritation. She said, "You're a real piece of work, Alex." I said, "You knew exactly who I was when you married me." She left without finishing her coffee. A week later, I got another letter, not from her, but from her lawyer. A formal request for discovery review, claiming potential concealment of assets. Marcus and I sat down again. He sighed as he read through it. "They're fishing. They want you to panic, overreact, maybe settle out of guilt." I didn't panic. I'd kept every receipt, timestamp, and notarized record. I even had an external drive with all my correspondence archived, scanned documents, emails, metadata logs. Not out of obsession, just habit. My work deals with verification. It's second nature to me. We drafted a response with attached exhibits. Marcus said it was overkill. I said, "That's the point." A month passed. No follow-up motion. Silence again. Then, one evening, I got a call from my mother. Her voice was tight. "Someone came by the house asking questions about the deed," she said. A woman said she was from an appraisal service. My mother lives in Spokane. The house, our old house, is in Edmonds. Nobody had any business showing up at her place asking about deeds. I called the county clerk the next morning. Sure enough, someone had tried to file a request for verification on the property, citing potential ownership dispute. Anonymous filing, but the IP address matched a firm in Seattle, Claire's lawyer's firm. Marcus called them directly. 10 minutes later, I got a call from Claire. She was crying. Not the soft, manipulated kind of crying, the kind where everything's already gone too far. She said she didn't know he'd done that she'd told him to just check options. Apparently, he'd gone rogue, trying to intimidate me into reopening negotiations. I told her I believed her, even if I didn't. And maybe part of me actually did, not because she was innocent, but because she looked more lost than malicious now, like someone realizing that revenge is just grief with paperwork. I wish I could say that was the end, but things have a way of dragging on when pride's at stake. A few weeks later, mutual friends started messaging me about posts Claire had made on social media, vague, emotional, self-pitying captions about being betrayed by the person you trusted most, finding strength after deceit. Nothing explicit, but obvious enough for anyone who knew us. I didn't respond, didn't comment, didn't post a counterstory. Let her have the sympathy. Let her perform recovery. But I did one thing. I compiled everything, screenshots, public posts, the fake appraisal request, the court filings, into a single encrypted archive and stored it in 3 locations: local drive, cloud, and physical USB. Not to use against her, but because I'd learned that truth, once lost, tends to stay lost unless you guard it. Marcus laughed when I told him, "You treat this like an operation." I said, "Because that's what it became. And maybe that's the saddest part. The last time I saw Claire in person was 3 months ago. She stopped by the house to pick up a few old design portfolios she'd left in the basement. She looked different, quieter, softer, almost smaller. As she was leaving, she turned to me and said, 'You really don't hate me, do you?' I said no. She smiled, a strange, tired smile. 'Then why did you have to win like that?' I didn't have an answer then. I still don't. Because what do you tell someone who tried to take everything when you defended yourself too well? That victory feels like ash? That you would have preferred a fight you could actually feel, instead of a silent war fought through files and timestamps?" She left. That was it. No closure, no goodbye. Just the sound of her car engine fading down the street. I started therapy not long after. My therapist asked me, "What are you trying to recover? The relationship or your sense of trust?" I said, "The part of me that still believes in fairness." Because that's what broke first, I think. Not love, not loyalty. Fairness. The quiet assumption that decency means safety. I don't regret protecting myself, but I do regret how much of me it required. How cold you have to become just to survive something that used to be warm. Now, I keep to myself. I work, I take Cooper on long walks, I go to my mother's on weekends. I've started painting again, something I used to do before Claire. It's messy, but it's honest. Sometimes, late at night, I check the house's security feed, the same system I built years ago. Empty rooms, soft light, the dog sleeping near the stairs. It's peaceful, but not quite home. And I guess that's the truth most people never post about when they talk about winning. Winning costs something. Sometimes, it costs exactly what you were trying to protect. Final update. A year's a strange unit of time. It's long enough to make everything look smaller in the rearview mirror, but close enough that some nights still taste like that same bitter aftershock. People ask me sometimes, coworkers, distant relatives, if I've moved on. I never know how to answer that. Moving on sounds like something you do, an action. This wasn't that. This was erosion, slow, silent, mostly invisible, until one day you realize the ground beneath you isn't what it used to be. The divorce was finalized last spring. She didn't contest again after the last motion got denied. Her lawyer apparently left the firm a few months later. I didn't ask why, but I can guess. Claire moved to Portland. She still does design work, I think. I see her name tagged occasionally in local business listings. Once, someone forwarded me a photo from an interior design magazine, an article about finding resilience through reinvention. I recognized her handwriting on a sketch in the background. It didn't sting. It just felt distant, like reading an obituary for a version of my life that never fully existed. The house is still mine, technically my mother's, though she signed a living trust to pass it back to me. I refinanced, repainted, re-everythinged. The walls that once echoed arguments now hold quiet, sometimes too quiet. I replaced most of the furniture, not because I needed to, but because every object has memory, and memory has weight. The only thing I kept was the coffee table, solid oak, scratched at the corners from when Cooper was a puppy. That table's seen everything. Morning coffees, late-night talks, silent dinners that felt like truce negotiations. Now it's just a table again. Cooper's older, grayer around the muzzle. He sleeps more, but he's fine. Dogs are resilient like that. They don't hold grudges. They don't replay old conversations in their heads. I envy that simplicity. The therapy continued. I won't pretend it turned me into a better person overnight, but it helped me understand something I couldn't back then, that winning wasn't what I wanted. What I wanted was not to be fooled again. And there's a difference between the two. For months after the court case, I kept every document backed up, triple-checked, cross-filed. Even after it was over, I couldn't stop. My therapist called it residual hypervigilance. I called it insurance. Old habits die slow when you've seen how quickly trust can evaporate. But the truth is, I wasn't afraid of Claire anymore. I was afraid of myself, of what being betrayed had made me capable of. There's a certain satisfaction that comes from seeing someone underestimate you and then watching their plan implode. It's clean, sharp, surgical, addicting, even. But afterward, there's the silence, and that silence forces you to look at who you became to win. I'd turned love into a legal operation. And when the operation succeeded, there was nothing left alive on the table. I dated a little after the divorce. Nothing serious. A few dinners, some polite conversations. Every time, I found myself analyzing people, how they phrased things, whether they hesitated before answering, how they handled the check. My brain ran like a scanner, searching for red flags, loopholes, inconsistencies. Once a woman I met online said, "You seem careful." She meant it as a compliment, but it hit me wrong. Because she was right. I am careful. Too careful. There's a point where self-protection becomes isolation dressed in logic. I'm still figuring out where that line is. Claire and I spoke once, about 6 months ago. Out of nowhere, she emailed me. Subject line, just checking in. I stared at it for an hour before opening it. It was short. She said she was doing okay, had moved into a new apartment, was seeing someone. She said she hoped I was happy too. I typed a reply 3 times and deleted it 3 times. Finally, I wrote, "I'm glad you're doing well. I'm doing okay too. Take care of yourself." That was it. No anger, no nostalgia, no need to reopen anything. She never replied. And that silence, for once, felt like peace. There are still moments, though, when the past sneaks in through cracks. Like when I see couples arguing in grocery stores, or when a client signs a contract without reading it, or when a friend says, "We don't need to put that in writing." My pulse spikes before my brain catches up. Trust doesn't come back all at once. It rebuilds in fragments. But I'm better now. Not happy, maybe, but grounded. I've learned to separate preparedness from paranoia. I still keep copies of things, but now it's just tax forms and receipts, not people. Every once in a while, I think back to that day in the kitchen, the moment she said, "I'm keeping the house, the car, and the dog." And I remember how calm I was when I said, "Take them." That wasn't confidence. That was surrender. A quiet acknowledgement that the person I'd loved wasn't standing in front of me anymore. Just a version of her shaped by resentment and entitlement. And maybe she saw me the same way. Two people, each convinced the other had become unrecognizable. She wasn't evil. That's the hardest part to explain to people who want villains in their stories. Claire wasn't a monster. She was human, scared, proud, and convinced she was owed something for the years she'd invested. In a way, I get it. When love turns into currency, everyone wants a refund. Last month, I had dinner with my mother. She asked me, "Would you ever get married again?" I thought about it. Not with bitterness, just curiosity. "Maybe," I said, "if I can ever learn to stop treating relationships like contracts." She smiled the way mothers do when they know that's not a promise you can make. So yeah, that's the update. No big twist, no poetic justice. Just a man and a dog, a quiet house, a garden starting to grow again. The legal war is over. The emotional one still hums in the background sometimes, like static you can't quite turn off. But it's quieter now. The documents are boxed away. The security feeds still run, not because I expect danger, but because I like the feeling of order. Sometimes I sit on the porch at night, Cooper next to me, the streetlights flickering through the trees, and I think about how strange it is that protecting yourself can feel so much like loneliness. And I think that's the real cost nobody talks about. You can defend everything, your house, your money, your reputation, but every layer of armor takes a piece of warmth with it. You end up safe, untouchable, and just a little bit colder than you were before.